Alrighty, yo, what is going on, everybody? It's your boy, Mr. DDG94, back with another reaction video. Today, we finna react to the WrestleMania build that saved WWE. The WrestleMania build that saved WWE. I'm not for sure which one this is. I don't know if this is the one with Stone Cold and Brett, or if this is the one with Stone Cold and Shawn and Mike Tyson. I don't know which one this will be. But anyway, so without further ado, let's get right into it.
There's not that many shows that make such a strong statement like WrestleMania 14. This event is widely considered the turning point for the World Wrestling Federation to steer in the right direction and finally make an impact in the Monday Night Wars. From a narrative standpoint, there's not that many shows that come close to the statement that this event made. And that's because you saw with your own eyes the company basically tell you that they're here and they're here for the #1 spot. The only event since then for the WWE that I see as a statement show is WrestleMania 21. It's not the greatest show, I'm referring to WrestleMania 14, but WrestleMania distinctively stands out. That said, the story for the event has to be traced back a year earlier. Around early 1997, it had become clear that the WWF was the #2 promotion in North America. WCW slowly had a stranglehold on the industry and weren't letting go. They had the better stars, but also were more cutting edge as it relates to the landscape of pro wrestling. WCW was just flat out better. They had the better stars, but also were more cutting edge as it relates to the landscape of pro wrestling. WWF was still riding that new generation vibe they had for a few years up to this point, but they were slowly shedding away from it. Stone Cold Steve Austin, Goldust, and Brian Pillman were characters that looked a bit out of place in the promotion and fit something like ECW. What made them so different is how grounded in reality they were. Goldust was a super odd character for that era because he brought more sexuality compared to the others. Brian Pillman is Brian Pillman, an unpredictable maniac who doesn't know his next move, and Stone Cold was the man that saw through all the nonsense the new generation had and refused to be a cartoon. This is putting it simply. WrestleMania 13, despite the iconic submission match, or the I Quit match, was a massive failure. In some ways, you can attribute this to the WWF being uninspired, but it's also because Shawn Michaels lost his smile. It's funny because this would come back to bite him a year later. WrestleMania 13 was driven by a massive rematch between Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels, and since Shawn won the first one, you understand the resolve #2, especially because Bret Hart was the biggest draw in the WWF at the time. It was obviously a vehicle for Shawn Michaels to go over and become the new guy, but in the moment, Bret Hart was supposed to win. While HBK did better in live events, Bret was better all around and a massive draw internationally. Bret Hart internationally is one of the biggest wrestlers in history. Canada, England, Germany, Italy, Kuwait, the United Arab Emirates. The reason why I'm mentioning this is because while Bret was on his way out, he still had some value. It's not like there was nothing to do with Bret Hart, especially after the crazy year he had. Shawn Michaels feigned an injury and stayed away from WrestleMania 13, which I find funny because he's just casually chilling on commentary in the main event when he should be in the ring. But that night birthed the start of Stone Cold Steve Austin's ascent to megastar status. So yes, WrestleMania 13 from a buy rate standpoint was a massive failure. Yes. However, when we look back on it in hindsight, it was equally as important as WrestleMania 14 in some ways. Austin going back to 1996 was already considered the real deal. People loved this guy even as a heel because he was morally consistent, never backed down from a fight, and unlike the faces, he wasn't a dumbass that thought people whenever and wherever. He would actually look at the situation and act. Stone Cold was pure fire, so much intensity inside and outside the ring, a high ring IQ, and the most distinctive promo in the entire company. So Shawn Michaels backing out of the match only did favors for Stone Cold. For Bret Hart, he still remembers this match fondly and considers it a massive highlight in his career, and rightfully so. That match created the entire formula for the Attitude Era main events, something that WWF would fully implement with that legendary over-the-edge main event between Stone Cold and Dude Love. But WrestleMania 13 is the blueprint along with Survivor Series 97's main event, because that was a bit of an Attitude Era brawl as well. But despite all the noise for Austin and Bret, the WWF was still doing bad. What's ironic is that while 1997 suffered a lot in the ratings department, it's one of the best crafted years in WWE history, if not the very best, because you were seeing these characters slowly come down to life and become more grounded with each week. Bret was like a superhero for multiple years. Now, he was whining to summon to others the voice of reason who spoke with nothing other than logic. Stone Cold was now a face despite doing things that would make him a heel years earlier, and that's because WWF had their ear to the audience, and instead of being like, he's a heel. They switched their format entirely to make Austin the face. I cannot imagine Stone Cold in 1994. He's too brash, too in your face, and intense. Stone Cold was not adjusted, the WWF adjusted, and it led to magic. For one, they stopped the US colored ropes in favor of the red ropes, more emphasis on brand exposure with the massive Raw stage, the iconic Raw stage. This stage is one of the best stages ever. It's evolved, you know, they had the WWF logo. It was also no longer Raw. It was Raw is War. They didn't force you to cheer anybody, and the characters were gray. They weren't black and white. Shawn Michaels might be valid for one thing, although that basically means you agree with a cokehead. One moment you might be like, he's right, but it's like, why am I agreeing with this guy? He snorts coke every day. But for another, Bret's complaints are valid. You're gonna be like, maybe this guy isn't so bad. If anything, Stone Cold in storyline is the best person in the main event because his morals are fully in line. He didn't discriminate. He'll stun a man, a woman, and even Santa Claus. But even with these changes in the more grounded direction, the WWF was still struggling. It was very bad, and to the point where Vince McMahon told Bret Hart to explore other options. Now, I'm not saying what he's saying is fact, but there was some points where the WWF was struggling. It was very bad for them. What set them on the straight path was the 3-hour pay-per-views. In Your House was $19.95, but with the extra hour, it was now $30. It wasn't immediate, but this helped immensely and caused Vince to tell Bret that they had the money to keep him. And this was October 24th, 1997. But at that point, it seemed like Bret was staying. That never happened because when Bret asked about his potential plans, he was supposed to lose to Shawn Michaels at 3 consecutive pay-per-views before winning back the title on a Raw episode, which obviously wouldn't have happened. By that point, HBK would have been like, that wasn't gonna happen. So he was out. Montreal happens, and while this brought a ton of heat and personal gripes from the fans, Vince just decided that he should embrace the character. A lot of fans were pointing out that he was practically killing his own company and blew the whole thing into proportions. Like, I look at the message boards, I look at this old stuff archive.
It was a fucked up moment, but man, did he make that shit work. If there's one thing you can't say about Vince, he know how to turn shit into diamonds. I don't know how this nigga know how to do it. He just knows how to do it. He can turn shit into diamonds. He took a shitty situation and turned it into the turning point of his company overtaking WCW. I don't know how you do that. I don't know how you somehow survived probably one of the biggest, massive PR blunders of all time and flip that shit into one of the greatest comebacks ever. But somehow, some way, Vince did that shit.
People legitimately thought this would ruin the WWF. But looking at it from that time period's perspective, it didn't look all that good for them to hand one of their biggest stars to the competition. But Vince's perspective is this: Shawn Michaels. Maybe the rumors are true, I don't know. But Bret Hart in 1997 was 40 years old, which in 1997 wrestling was 65 years old. There was exceptions, and ironically, him going to WCW would lower the average age in the main event. You know, he's gonna be in there with Hulk Hogan, Roddy Piper, Ric Flair. He's younger than all of these guys. But the vision of this new era was without the Hitman. To Vince, it was a young man's game. While I think Bret would have done decently in the Attitude Era, it's important to mention the issues between Hart and Michaels. Bret turned heel, became the #1 villain in the WWF, but then HBK just lapped him like that with DX. It wasn't obviously all on HBK's talent, obviously, because Bret Hart had to do some mid-card feud with the Patriot, so obviously there was going to be animosity, especially because Hart himself had to be talked into a heel turn. But with Hart gone, the WWF was all in on this new era of Attitude. It's like Bret Hart was holding them back from being this TV-14 wrestling show or whatever. You saw it coming like a flash. More sexual stories, violent stories, and an all-around wild show that forces you to keep your eyes on the screen. The best thing about the WWF was the vibe of anything could happen. They teased Kane for months. He finally shows up, randomly interrupts the show and drops somebody with a chokeslam. Stone Cold might piss off half the roster and have a target on his back. It was magic. But despite all of this, WWF still didn't get themselves in a position to knock down WCW. That said, all of the pieces were in play. The Undertaker and Kane story, the rise of Rocky Maivia, and even Sable had a long-term story with Mark Merrill. All of these things would come to a head at WrestleMania, but the journey to get there in itself was thrilling. Now, the entire story of Mike Tyson and the WWF isn't fully known, but one has to speculate that the discussion between them came as far back at a time where Bret Hart was still in the WWF. So in some ways, they figured the money that is spent on Bret Hart for the next 2 or 3 years should go to Mike Tyson. Tyson was a lifelong wrestling fan, a huge boxer, but he had plenty of controversies. He went to jail for bit Evander Holyfield's ear off and was suspended from competing in a boxing ring for some time. It wasn't until October of 1998 that Tyson would be reinstated and have his boxing license once again. The idea of Mike Tyson wasn't exactly super optimistic, but it was a huge gamble. And it's not me saying some WWF documentary stuff. You can go read the stories at the time. A lot of people were a bit worried about Mike Tyson. Plus, when WWF teased him once, the fans booed. Tyson was the key to the WWF, but what also helped was how massive WrestleMania 14 felt, even without him. For one, Undertaker and Kane's story was built for nearly a year. Undertaker finally learning that his younger brother was alive and then he was coming. Massive. The dead man, The Undertaker, being separated from Paul Bearer allowed for his character to evolve and fit in line with the new Attitude Era. And it made for compelling TV. One moment Undertaker is shocked and struck, the other, he just might team up with his brother. It was a proper long-term story, not long for the sake of it. They understood how to draw out the story and get it to WrestleMania. It was a great setup and one of the best pure stories in WWE history. Kane forces his brother's hand and almost bites more than he could chew, but regardless, he was up for the challenge. The Rock was rapidly rising. He was once a follower of the nation. Within 3 months of joining them, he surpassed the leader himself, Farouk. Rock's charisma is funny here because you could notice him trying to find his voice and mannerisms. He was doing good, but the build to WrestleMania 14 itself was incredible for him. He just exploded and became the Rock that everyone knows right during this time period. The Rock was always positioned to be a big star, but this time period proved he could be much more. What I also find fascinating is that the WWF was building random characters that were getting over. Like never before would these characters get over in previous eras. Terry Funk would come out wearing pantyhose on his head and hold a chainsaw running around and it would get a big reaction. The Dude Love and Mick Foley connection. Dude Love is just some schizophrenic guy trying to live out his idea of what cool is, and that's a topic for another day, the three faces of Foley. Sable got over massively. She started to surpass Sunny as the woman of the World Wrestling Federation. She had massive sex appeal. She was charismatic as long as you don't hand her a microphone. Great screen presence. I mean, it's Sable. And that mixed tag match.
Let's just be real, bro. She had big ass titties, bro. Let's just keep it real, bro. She had some big ass titties, bro.
Involving Goldust, Luna, and Mero had hype around it. The WWF had a lot up their sleeve for this WrestleMania. A WrestleMania that almost seemed like it abandoned tradition in favor of degeneracy and attitude, but that was further from the truth. With the main event, it was already a classic battle between Stone Cold and Shawn Michaels. They had a wonderful match at King of the Ring the previous year. Here, though, it was wrapped in drama with DX causing problems. Stone Cold being an unfavorable potential champion for Mr. McMahon, and on top of that, the baddest man on the planet deciding to stick it to Stone Cold and join DX. It was a crazy build, and while hindsight would make it look light, you have to look at it from a 1998 perspective. And that's the thing with these videos. Whenever I make these videos, I have to be like, a lot of this wouldn't feel major now. And if you're like, what do you mean major? If WrestleMania 14 happened the exact way that it did, people would have complained about it. Oh, this match wasn't good. Copy the match quality from 98 to today. People wouldn't like it. WrestleMania 14 turned out to be a massive success. Undertaker and Kane was like a comic book battle. It's very dividing, but regardless, I believe it did its job in bringing out a heated battle that enhanced the Undertaker's character while preserving Kane's and proving that he's more than just a one-and-done Undertaker character. The main event had the back problem from Shawn Michaels, but he still put in the work. What I find ironic about it is that for the entire 1997, Shawn Michaels is supposed to be number one. In his mind and in the boss's mind. HBK avoided WrestleMania 13. Bret had to leave the company, and when WrestleMania 14 came to an end, he was getting shunned in favor of Stone Cold and a new era of professional wrestling. Unlike the last 2 years, there was nothing HBK could do to escape this. He had no leverage because Stone Cold was the realest deal the company had seen since Hulk Hogan was at his peak of his popularity. Kevin Nash, who was in WCW at the time, has gone on to say that this WrestleMania is what made everyone think that the WWF had it in the bag. And I won't forget the day in my life when Tyson came to WrestleMania. Every WrestleMania match had a movie quality trailer in front of it. In case you hadn't been watching, you were caught up. Kane was shooting fire, everybody. It was amazing. The next day I go to TV and I just knew, you know, man, you watch something, you're smart to the business. I walked by Kevin Sullivan. He said, "Feel that, Nash? Water got a little cold last night. Hit an iceberg called WrestleMania." He knew, I knew, anybody who was smart knew that. And all of a sudden the ratings war was back and forth. All of a sudden it was just like, and the Lakers have won 33 straight. WrestleMania 14 drew 730,000 buys, a massive number and the biggest for a WWF event since WrestleMania 5. Then 2 weeks later, Raw beat Nitro in the ratings after teasing a huge match between Stone Cold and Mr. McMahon. The Austin and McMahon story turned that tide, but the advantage was starting to go WWF's favor as far back as March. The WWF's attendance increased dramatically. They were seeing record gates in a hot streak that would coincide with Stone Cold's crowning as champion. But it started under HBK, who was champion and leader of DX. You know, obviously Stone Cold's the reason, but it was heated. It would become more monstrous after Austin became champion. Alright, what do you guys think of WrestleMania 14's build? Please comment down below, and that's for this video. Make sure to hit the rock bottom on the like button, or perhaps the Stone Cold Stunner on the subscribe button.
All right, man. That's just gonna about do it for this one. I agree. I think this was the one that put WWE on the map and pretty much put WCW in their place as the second fiddle until Vince eventually bought them out. I do agree with that. I think this was the big one, bringing in Mike Tyson. I think that's what really put them over. That's what got them into the pop culture realm. Because at first it was just wrestling. Then it became pop culture when you bring a big name like Mike Tyson in. Then you got this dude, Stone Cold, everybody looking at him. He talking his shit, doing what he do. Eventually you gonna get hooked into it, and there you go. But yeah, man, that's just gonna about do it for this one, most definitely, man. I will see you all in the next video. Till then, deuces.